There is an old adage, one that you might have heard from a grandparent or village wise person, the one that says, you get out what you put in, meaning your efforts are matched to some degree by the results or the output. Now take our nonprofit, Pioneer Knowledge Services, who delivers this cool program that you're listening to right now, takes a bunch of effort that you don't even see. We hope that you obtain value from our efforts to deliver it to your powers of reason. Here is where you come in. You, the listeners. Make our efforts rewarded. Consider donating to keep us moving forward. Visit pioneer-ks.org and click on donate. Hey everybody, thanks for joining Pioneer Knowledge Services Because You Need to Know. Today we're going to really highlight some of the things that are under the hood of human behavior and how that shows up in organizations of any size. It really is the elements of who we are. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Edwin, it's so great to see you again. Thanks for having me on your show. It's just a blast to be here, a total honor, privilege, and really, I'm just so excited to have this conversation finally with you. My name is Dr. Fred Moss, or Fred, and some people still call me Dr. Moss, and I live in Grass Valley, California. That's up here north of Auburn, in between Sacramento and Reno, in the west side of the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. Very beautiful, very eclectic, very rustic area. I live here with my incredibly beautiful wife and a gift from God that she is, as well as three other gifts that we have been gifted called felines. We have Desposito, Winston, and Valentino, who homeschool us every single day. The most interesting thing near me, probably the Sierra Nevadas. And, this is gold country. So this is where gold was actually mined. And you can pine for gold even now and get little tidbits of it. I live in gold country, and it's no doubt that's part of the rustic, eclectic, beautiful nature of what it means to live in Grass Valley and Nevada City. The thing that I have learned over time by living here, that people are really, really, really interesting, and especially the people that are off the beaten trail, as if there is such thing as a beaten trail. I've always been interested in people who are off the beaten trail. It's been something I've been seeking and searching, exploring, and digging into since as far back as I can remember, just riding my bike into the parts of the neighborhood that my parents told me not to go in so that I can meet interesting people. I absolutely love working in the mental health field, but not because of the way the mental health field is already designed, but because of the impact I can make to actually shift some of the paradigms in the mental health field, given the position that I've been blessed with as a veteran psychiatrist, someone who's been playing in this field for 45 solid years, as well as the level of capacity to communicate using podcasts and using books and using blogs and using keynote speaking, as well as my job as a frontline doctor, allows me to really get the message across to people that this psychiatric industrial complex doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And maybe you don't need to be going there if you feel uncomfortable. Maybe there's nothing wrong with you in the first place, even if you know that there is, because that knowing that there is something wrong with us is so universal that it's actually a sign of being normal.
I'm going to go back to that childhood memory of riding the bikes where your parents said, don't go. Did you find your authentic self at a very young age?
That's a really interesting question. I think the answer to that is actually no. I don't think I was really looking for myself. I was kind of looking like who out there could represent something that I could become.
Okay.
What is it that I needed to learn in order to step into who I was to become?
By being somewhat, I would think maybe someone who might label it defiant of your parents' wishes, that you were being authentic because you just did what you felt driven to do.
Well, there was some authenticity in my search, and there was some unstoppability. There was some tenacity for sure as I got on my Stingray and then my bigger Schwinn and then put my thumb out on the road and really got into those neighborhoods like, don't cross 9 Mile. Okay, Mom. And, I was on 8 Mile by the end of the day.
So there's an adventuresome spirit in you. Where did that come from? Where did that seed come from that made you the adventurer at such a young age?
I think I was born, I was born to be a healer. I was born into a family that had already had a fair amount of conflict, chaos, and disarray. I had two older brothers, 10 and 14 years older than me. That's who I entered the family with. There was them and my parents. And 2 years later would be my sister. It was just like, wow, there's four big people here. They have four different ideas about things. And my job is to figure out, like, I was called in to be the bundle of joy that brought love and connection to that family. And my brothers tell me I did a pretty good job at it, at least for a couple years. After that, maybe not straight up for all 66 years, but at least for the first
for a little bit. You were all that for a little bit. Yeah, I hear you.
I was all that for a little bit, and I was a rolling bundle of joy. I was brought out to bring people laughter and bring people smiles. I do remember those days where I was sort of like the monkey on the accordion.
Yeah, right. You're performing,
exactly.
Right? Yeah, you're performing to bring joy.
I was smart. I was clearly smart, and my brothers made it their business to leave me a fair amount of precociousness. I knew how to read and write and, actually do math when I entered kindergarten, and that put me way ahead of my class. It was just an exploration. It's like, where is this Fred supposed to land?
Right.
And, school became very boring for me very early. And that was very clear that wasn't where I was going to learn how to communicate, which I knew was the most important thing that humans needed to do.
Let's talk about that with that setting of what you just set the stage about and translate that into organizational behaviors, because you're talking an organizational unit of a family. So let's flip that over to how most people interface. Of course, family's the first thing you get to see in diapers, but as you progress in age, then you start working outside the home or getting a job and all these different interfaces with other people. So how does trust become an enabler or disabler in that progression, let's say?
How does trust become an enabler or disabler in that progression? Well, I think that trust is an interesting thing. Trust is earned. It's not just offered. Mm-hmm. My son tells me that I have the most optimistic faith in people that he's ever seen. I don't know where he gets that. I don't see that at all. But the idea is that I'm kind of open-minded. I'm expecting people to deliver to me. I'm expecting to learn from people who they are. And I'm hoping not to already put somebody in a box long before I actually have conversations with them. Inside of let's say a corporate group environment or any kind of either business or small group, such as a family or a community group or a company, I think what we're really looking for is to find our place. What gaps can I fill that aren't already filled? Who can I be that I can be of service and be interesting and interested in what it is that I do? Like, how can I make a difference? I think each of us really want to make a difference. We don't want to just be overlooked and unseen. We'd really want to actually put some impact into every environment that we enter, whether that's through speaking or listening or just being present or filling an actual gap. That's what I think most of us are doing all the time, is seeing, okay, where can my interjection, where can my contribution fit in so that I can be seen and heard and respected for who I am.
I'm going to bring in an article from Forbes dated 9 September 2024. 3 reasons to bring your authentic self to work by a psychologist. And I'm just going to scroll down here to the thing that pops for me. Is the second bullet in this article is authenticity fuels motivation, dedication, and engagement. Mm-hmm. But not everybody authentic is pleasant. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can be authentically a very negative person and not do well in a community. So how does an organization help to manicure the lawn, so to speak, of getting the behaviors that benefit the majority?
Yeah. Well, I think the goal is not necessarily to be pleasant. Let's face that. The goal is to be authentic. Pleasantness is overrated. There are situations where not being pleasant is exactly the way one should be in order to get the next job done, in order to move the needle forward. Being pleasant isn't nearly as important as being authentic, at least in my view. See, when we're authentic, look, very few people, if any, maybe it's 0 people have ever achieved, full-scale authenticity. We have become people that we're not in order to protect the person that we are. And that's just the essence of authenticity.
Say that again, please. Say that again.
We have become people that we're not in order to protect the person that we are. We actually choose to be someone that we're not, as if we're protecting the person that we are.
Is it a fear of conflict that does that? I mean, what's the trigger there?
I think it's a fear of being hurt, a fear of having our heart broken, a fear of being dismissed, disrespected, or disregarded, or essentially thrown off the island. And if we put our own authentic, tender self out there, it's a fear of having our sensitive, delicate areas chopped off, or mocked, or mimicked, or made fun of. So we learned in school, actually. It was very early on, and maybe even most of us have learned in our families prior to school. This precocious, communication-driven, adventurous child in elementary school was a terror. I mean, I was a true and honest terror. There was no elementary school teacher who ever forgot it to this day, having Fred as a student. I'm quite sure of that.
Got it.
And that's because I spoke all the time, and I was really funny, and I had really good things to say, but I was disruptive.
Right.
And being disruptive wasn't really what was expected.
And I think you're right. I think there is some kind of model that we've all had shadowing our behaviors that says that's not acceptable behavior. Get in line, don't be disruptive, because now you're the focus of, you're taking away the focus.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point. I wanted to follow up on this Forbes article. It says that in a 2018 study indicates that authenticity in the work, and this is all quoted from this article, I'm reading from the article, that authenticity in the workplace is strongly linked to intrinsic motivation. When employees feel they can be their true selves at work, they are more likely to experience higher levels of engagement, dedication, and job satisfaction. Why not does HR lead with that? Why is that's not how organizations start the culture up?
Engagement, dedication, and job satisfaction as an outcome of authenticity has to be weighed up against the risk of people actually saying their truth and taking down the system. After all, if you say your truth, if you're authentic and you're really able to honestly speak your truth inside of corporations that have their own techniques of perhaps corruption or covert deception or misalignment of values or asking people to do things that are not in balance with their soul. If someone's going to speak up against that out loud, that becomes a risk to the status quo of the corporate modus operandi. And we have to do something to protect the corporation and the status quo of the way things are. Authenticity is very frightening, as shown like in so many ways these days in the world of cancel culture and censorship. All that people have to do is speak up and say, what the hell? WTF? And that's really scary to the inherent system.
The old metaphor, I guess, is what I would call it, is that, you don't rock the boat. Don't cause any agitation because you could upset the universe kind of thing. Everything is a fear base. I want to go into what you're kind of getting into is the psychological safety within an organization, within a culture, within a family is kind of the fruit that everybody wants to get to. But how to get there is a lot of behavioral change.
Well, it's really about being honest, about being genuine, and about being authentic, and about speaking your true self. We've reached a point on the back end of these people, you and I included, who often pretend to be somebody else in order to protect the person that we are, that we've now chosen that we don't even speak when we should, or we speak when we shouldn't, and even gotten to the point where we say things simply in order to stay in a group. And even more ludicrous and preposterous is the notion that we often say things that even we don't believe. Dude, what the hell is that?
Well, all right. So let's talk about that. So are you saying that we say things that are preposterous? We know they're preposterous, but somehow we have some conviction to say it.
Exactly. And the conviction is we get to stay in the group that we think is protecting us. We don't get disengaged. We continue to belong.
Right. You're staying in the circle, right? So is that just a definition of bad group thinking?
No, that's a definition of sheer inauthenticity. That's just a definition of being entirely afraid of being discharged.
Because you don't believe like they do.
Exactly. So
you don't want to act like...
I will go on record saying something I don't believe. That is an outstanding human characteristic, by the way. That is beyond lying.
Yeah.
That is even beyond lying to ourselves. ourselves. That is out there.
Wow. So that should have a higher level of critical thinking against. I'm going to say that the perfect example of what you're talking about is the political culture in this country and probably every other country is that people say things to get elected. They don't believe whatever they're saying. How does someone that's a consumer of information be able to start discerning that kind of bad behavior?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. It's almost you're butting up against a major question of like, what is reality? And
Yeah.
In the present day state and age, reality is not something that you can look out there and listen to people and find one by one. So reality is an inner state, I would say. All you can do is be the change you want to be. I mean, that's it. All you can do is actually live inside of the reality that's been inherent or, gifted to you, blessed with you, that you're catching up with. So what you know to be so in your soul, I firmly believe to be so in your soul.
Yeah.
There's a whole new quality. Those things, if they can surface, is going to represent a certain sense of reality. So if you're going to look out there into the news world to try to figure out what your reality is, or if you're going to get on social media and try to figure out what reality is, you're going to be sadly disappointed.
Or not. There are a lot of people that love sucking up all that stuff. They love it.
Oh, you can suck it up, or they can pretend to love it. But I'm telling you that their reality is being shaken. Their reality is being agitated, and you can soak it all up all you want. You can spend 6, 8, 10 hours a day or more on social media, in the news sites. I have some friends who make it their very biggest ambition to get out there and get sources from literally all over the world. These are people are dedicated to finding their reality and then distilling it out and allowing yourself to discern what could or could not be so, given the sources that are saying whatever it is, any kind of ulterior motive that any of these sources might have at a certain time, who they're representing, what their ultimate intended outcome is, and being able to, really synthesize all that and come up with the reality. You have to let go of what you think and especially let go of the things that you know that you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that you know are the most dangerous after all.
This kind of sounds to me, and I'm not a theologian, but it kind of sounds like a Buddhist approach to just sticking with what is in front of you, instead of going off in all these directions and letting your energy get pulled in multiple facets of not reality, but somebody else's reality.
Well, I'm not going to argue with anything that the Buddhist approach has to say about things. I've never read any Dharma that I didn't agree with. Have you? I don't think that there's anything there in Dharma that is disagreeable, ever. Nothing. And for all of us humans, that's the thing about Dharma, is it's so fantastic that it just simply describes the human condition. What are you saying? That we shouldn't be in the here and now? We should be in the there and then? It's like, no, we should be in the here and now as best we can. And what we should deal with is right in front of us, because that's all we have. Let's just face it. That's not controversial. There's not an anti-Buddhist approach to things. The Buddha just explained exactly multiple ways in beautiful vocabulary, multiple ways to ascertain the human condition and then share it with others.
So what would be your advice in a organization if the leadership is listening right now and they are trying to build a more trusting culture? What would be things you could offer to help them prop up their organization?
Well, that's great. So first thing they should do is hire me. I would love to do some work with them and let me do a weekend workshop with whoever's there. So the way that would work is we would go over the way things are going on in that corporation, really maybe have a pre-meeting or two and get an idea of where, what direction are we going in? Where are we headed? What's our North Star? What's the goal here? Is it to create increased productivity or improve morale, or what are we really doing here? So we would look at that. And I think, once we do that, I think we're going to see that if we can create a safe space for people to actually become who they are, exactly what Forbes said in 2018, by the way, great article choice. Fantastic that you pulled that up. That's where we're going to get the greatest productivity. When we can create a space for people to actually raise their hand, ask proper questions from their soul, like what is it that's itching? What is it that needs to be addressed? And then raise when things aren't working out the way that they're intended to or the way that they should, that people can actually speak up and tell their superiors or tell their colleagues that X and Y aren't working as well as intended, rather than feeling like they might insult somebody if a particular project is not going. The only way we're going to be able to do that is to create the possibility of security and of safety inside the world of authenticity. And the only way to do that I've ever seen is to model it yourself. That's it. The only way to create authenticity in another person is to be authentic. When you pursue authenticity, you create a space for all the people around you to pursue their own authenticity in some degree of aspiration and maybe even awe. The possibility of speaking without stuttering, the possibility of sharing your thoughts for real as they arise, and they might even be different than they were an hour ago or a day ago, and you don't have to worry about the fact that your mind changed. You don't have to hold the same line day after day, week after week, month after month. That's not a requirement of what it is to be human.
Everything you just, in a nutshell, talked about in an organization and personal relationships is accountability. There's got to be an air of accountability in order to make all of that work.
Right. So accountability, is really, that's a great word. And thanks for bringing that up. In order for me to be accountable, I need to be accountable essentially to more than simply myself. I'm able to pull one over on myself. I already don't trust me at some level. And I already know that I might slime around and not give myself the full level of authenticity and the full level of accountability I deserve. So when I have another person, and that be like an accountability partner or let's say a committed listener of some level, then I have the possibility of actually making statements and then being held to those statements. At 6:30 tonight, I have an important meeting. And in that meeting, I've been asked to fill out one page. There's 3 prompts out there, and I'm to write out 3 answers to those prompts and have that ready for the 6:30 meeting.
Okay.
This man holds me accountable, as do I for him. And you can know that that will be done by 6:30 as well. There's an importance to me being my word. What does that really mean? That means that you can count on me when I say something that it will be done. That's what's called being my word. Now, if it can't be done, you can count on me to address that as soon as I realize that it can't be done, to let you know and clean up any of the messes that are associated with that. And not only that, like actually take responsibility for the fact that I didn't do that which I was said. And then recommit or renegotiate or really look at, am I ever going to get it done? And if so, by when?
I want to bring that back to the organization having, in order to create a safe space for organizational people to be uninhibited and to be naturally themselves, there has to be an accountability to the organization to provide that safety in order to even foster any of that. I'm bringing back the accountability in order for folks to recognize that you can be your authentic self, but if your organization is not protecting that space to begin with, you got to wonder, that's where most people probably operate from, is this cautious space. They're not going to put their neck on the block.
Yeah. When we start getting that, that's actually when we're chipping away at the integrity of the entire organization. Now, almost every organization that I've ever dealt with does have spaces where true and honest authenticity is actually not welcome. Ooh. Let's face it. It's like really actually not welcome because it is so disruptive.
We are not asking for your input. Thank you very much.
Exactly. And if people are honest about looking at the infrastructure of the actual created organization, you'll see that there are spaces where I don't care if that's what he thinks, it's not welcome into what's here. All the way going up to the C-suites, all the way going up to the CEOs and the CFOs, CTOs, or wherever you are. You can get that there's some situations where, like a smoking gun, like somebody's out there who's, blabbering, and what they're really doing in some cases is actually speaking the truth out loud where it's not welcome. And that can be so disruptive and disorienting to the status quo of the prevailing infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, it puts a defensive posture on.
Exactly.
Right? It becomes, whoa. You are poking the wrong bear here.
Exactly. Poking the wrong bear is a great way to put it. Exactly.
Yeah. The cool thing is that Merriam-Webster's word of the year 2023 was authentic.
Yeah.
One of them. There's a fair amount of them in this article, but authentic is top of the list. So they go by number of searches and lookups and all that sort of thing. In this article, just to wrap this up on what's authentic, authentic has a number of meanings, and I'm reading from this article from Merriam-Webster. Authentic has a number of meanings, including not false or imitation, a synonym of real and actual, and also true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. to go back to that organization that is, oh, hands off, you don't tell us how to do things. We've been doing this for 93 years and this is the process. Don't even upset this cart. They are not welcoming anybody to have their own personality, spirit, or character. Therefore, wouldn't you think that innovation is dead? There is no even way that that organization will ever innovate.
A really, really interesting point. So is that if we don't allow for a new thought, we won't create anything new. And that's just the way it is. If we don't allow for anything new to enter the system, then we simply won't be able to create anything new. We won't be able to grow with the times. We won't be able to innovate and generate.
Adapt. You can't adapt.
It can't.
Yeah.
It's unavailable. By the way, let's take a look at this, because if we take a look at something that we've already scratched on, we can look at the whole impact of artificial intelligence, which is built 100% on things that have already been done, things that have already been said. There's not true and honest innovation inside of artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence can look like it's creating something new based on putting together A, C, and F instead of A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. And then maybe actually coming up with a synthesized answer that appears to be something new. But the truth is, creating something new out of nothing, like innovating and generating in order to optimize systems, requires the creation of something new that might actually supersede what AI has to offer, as it's so embedded in past related evidence-based truths. And when you get in, that's the truth with medicine as well. So medicine is only interested in evidence-based truths. And if you do that, you actually take away from new breakthroughs. Like all of a sudden, people who come up with new breakthroughs in an environment that is built on evidence-based will not be accepted because there's no previous experiences of a new intervention being functional. So that newness will actually be immediately rejected because it's new, because it's different, because it doesn't have evidence base. It will be rejected from the system before it even starts, and thereby cancel the possibility of adapting indeed to a future. Components are shifting every single day.
Thinking out of the box, AI is not capable of thinking out of the box because everything's in the box.
Everything's in the box.
Right? I mean, in order to have innovation, creative thought, creativity, an example of, I just recently used the AI generative artwork or images. And when you put in the context of the image you want, some of the things are hideous, are absolutely gross looking stuff. It is like, whoa. But there is an attempt to have machines create. Logic is one thing, but creation is something totally different. So I hear what you're saying. In order to wrap up, I'm looking at the clock. Let's wrap up with, can you define for me what you think knowledge management is?
Knowledge management. Oh, wow. So first of all, we have to look at what is knowledge and what is knowledge versus understanding and wisdom. And when we start looking at those three things, they're over there on the tree of life, actually, in the Sefer Rot, those three separate different Sefer Rot in knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Knowledge base, I would say, and knowledge management is actually being able to open our mind to what it is that we're learning, and then keep our mind open, realizing that things are always due for adjustment. Like it's the possibility of remaining in inquiry even after we know something is what I think is really available here. And how do we do that? The most dangerous knowledge we have is the stuff that we know that we know. You see, there's the stuff that we know. And in that stuff, if someone else thinks they know something different than that which I know, I can actually say stuff like, well, we can agree to disagree. Or, well, yeah, you're just wrong, but I still love you. Or, I hear you, but, that's because you're just undereducated or something like that. That's the stuff that we know. The stuff that we know becomes really dangerous because now when someone says something that is different than what I know that I know, I dismiss them. I think they're just dead wrong. I might even dismiss everything about them, which is we've seen in the last several years how people dismiss the entire human if they think a certain way about a certain thing. Knowledge management is not that. What we're talking about in optimal knowledge management is the possibility of being open to any and all input, is the possibility of at least listening very carefully and radically to anything that anyone has to say that might be disruptive to the prevailing paradigm. When we can do that, now we're starting to explore really and to dance in this concept of optimal knowledge management. What do we do? Okay, we can record that which was said. You can take notes, or you can use your AI to learn and then compile knowledge-based information. Then here comes another piece of knowledge-based information, which might be, mutually exclusive. And we have to do like some sort of, if A can be true, then B can't be true, or something like that. We have to understand that, no, even in that phase, that's only the restrictions of logics that are giving us that outcome. Because in fact, A can be true and B can be true, even if they're mutually exclusive, even if they're diametrically opposed to each other. The possibility that A and B can coexist must be given consideration over and above our logistic restrictions that we design. See, logic has it that if A is so, then B can't be so. But that's because we're restricted to the whole notion of logic, where the world does not occur inside of logic.
I think the term that we're kind of dancing around is cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
In this piece is because it's a binary logic that says yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, and the world's not that simple.
It's just not. It's just not. A word that one of my mentors has been recently threw out a couple of weeks ago to discuss this is the word called integrative complexity.
Ooh.
And integrative complexity takes into consideration multiple states of the same affair, essentially getting that and that they all can coexist, even if none of them could actually be the same in our silly little mind, in our silly little logistical mind. They can all coexist as honest to goodness reality.
I think that brings up a good point for us to land on, because I think there's a majority of humans on the planet that likes simple answers.
Yeah.
And what you just described is the complexity of the world and life in general, in that we have to kind of shift the paradigm of how we process to look at things as not such a simple black and white solution.
It's funny. It's almost like once you start saying that, we can create the complex into being simple again. See, once we can open it up and start seeing that it's not so simple, it becomes simple to get that it's not so simple. In other words, it's very complex, and that's simply the truth, simply. It's complex. There's multiple different things that are coexisting together that are very restricted, limited, logistical minds based on binary, linear thinking can't capture. But that's just how we're hardwired. But obviously, we're not hardwired to understand the universe.
And the other thing, too, is that most conditions that humans run into, they'll overcomplicate what was simple by some reaction in themselves to overthink it, make it more complicated than it should have been. And that goes to Occam's razor.
Yeah.
I looked up integrative complexity on Wikipedia. Integrative, and see if this fits. I just like learning new terms, and I like this one. So integrative complexity is a research psychometric that refers to the degree to which thinking and reasoning involve the recognition and integration of multiple perspectives and possibilities and their interrelated contingencies.
I love it.
This is like Spock, right, from Star Trek.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just out there in all contingencies, looking at everything from all angles. And that's really the level, I think, that we're talking about, is having that authentic self bring that piece into your metric of operations. You're less biased and you don't believe everything you think.
Exactly. And even if you do believe what you think, you can give yourself the grace to realize that the opposite of what you think might also be true.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to exit this little discussion we've just had, because I think that's the challenge everybody on the planet needs to accept and say, okay, I'm ready to be authentic, and I will challenge what I think.
Exactly. Beautiful. Well said. I'm down.
All right, my friend. And thank you for being here.
It's been a pleasure, Edwin. Thank you for a great conversation. Great way to wake up this morning. I appreciate you, and you have a great week.
Thank you for joining this extraordinary journey, and we hope the experiences gained add value to you and yours. See you next time at Because You Need to Know. If you'd like to contact us, please email byntk@pioneer-ks.org or find us on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to Because You Need to Know, the Reference Podcast in Knowledge Management. My name is Soni Tonebe. As an art administrator, Because You Need to Know has been my go-to podcast and has helped me hone my management skills. Please consider sponsoring the podcast with your business.